USA's second game against Saudi Arabia, again, Saudi here as a guest, as was Qatar previously. And as we said all through the last few days, this was going to be a step up in terms of competition. It was. Mauricio Pochettino rolled back, exact same lineup, same 11. Before we get into the game, what do you think his mentality was, Landon? Because some people might not have watched or heard in terms of playing the same 11. You've been a coach. You know how you're tempted to change, but he said, no, this is the 11.
I think he's doing a few things. One is there's been some tumult around this team, right? Nations League did not help him find any clarity about this team. They were bad. The players he thought he could count on were not good. So then he rolls into Turkey and Switzerland. Those don't go well. So he has even less clarity. And he found a team that won a game, yes, against a terrible Trinidad team. And I think he's trying to send a message and say, if you win and you play well, you're going to play again. And that is part of that will help the players understand big picture. Hey, you play well, you win, you play again. And that's it. And if as long as he sticks by that, there's clarity for the players and that helps everyone.
Yeah, I think players respect and admire loyalty. I mean, I don't think players are naive. They recognize that, while sports is much more of a meritocracy than life, it's not a complete meritocracy and total meritocracy in that people sometimes are treated differently. That just kind of happens. But to the extent that you can mitigate some of that and treat people equally and reward good play and reward performance, I think players respond to that, and I think that they will gravitate to Pochettino. And the message that you're talking about him sending is not just internally; it's also externally to the players that aren't there. Yeah. Having said that, he gave them the opportunity. Now they have to take it. Go out against Saudi Arabia. As you said, it's a very different type of proposition, not for a number of different reasons, not the least of which is this was a Saudi Arabia team that said, we're not going to have possession. U.S. had lots and lots of possession. Saudi Arabia pulled back, absorbed plenty of pressure. They were very organized in their pressure. They looked to break. And I think that there was some not only some frustration, but a little bit of confusion as to what the U.S. wanted to do in that first half, Mosse.
I know Landon was harping on this on TV. Pochettino loves playing out of a back three, which is very common in world football right now. One of the fullbacks pushes up and the other drifts to the middle and functions almost like a third center back. But you thought that was one guy too many tonight because Saudi Arabia was playing in such a low block that you thought it was unnecessary to have Alex Freeman back there. They should have just played out with the two center backs.
Well, especially because the Saudis had just one striker high defending three center backs, right? And so it just becomes a numbers game. And if a team is going to sit that deep, you're okay sending another number forward. And in this case, I thought it would have made sense for Freeman to go higher and wider and Jack McGlynn to come inside. And he did a little bit of that at halftime. He rotated Sebastian Berhalter back, which I think hurt the team a little bit. But when you have a team that sits that deep, you need to send more numbers forward and just put more and more pressure on them.
Yeah, so the changes didn't come at halftime, and they waited to the kind of the typical 60-minute. But you want to go through some of the actions in the first half?
Well, we talked about him keeping the same lineup, and I almost think one of the most interesting positions in that regard is goalkeeper. The fact that Matt Friese has started both these games, and there were some Pochettino quotes that intimated that Friese is his number one right now over Matt Turner. What do you make of that, Landon?
I got some clarity on that. Sometimes with Pochettino, because English is not his first language.
Mhm.
So if you read the quote, and I don't know if I don't have it in front of me, but he basically said, we want to see if Matt Friese can be the number one goalkeeper. And I think what he was saying is, well, now I know from speaking to people is we want to see if he can be a number one goalkeeper. So like through the tournament, can he be the guy who can be our number one? Doesn't mean he is the number one or he's going to be the number one. But I said this on the broadcast, and you know this, Lex. Things can happen fast. If they have 2 games now without a goal conceded.
Mhm.
What happens if they go another 4 and win the Gold Cup and don't concede a goal? Maybe he's the goalie in the next camp.
Well, I think one thing that Pochettino has made very clear, and I would think that this would happen with any coach, to be quite honest with you, given the circumstances, that there is a competition for goalkeeper right now. And, a couple of years ago, when Matt Turner was undisputed, there was never going to be any question. And I do think that Matt Turner will have his opportunities. but that there is a competition, that says a lot. And that Zach Steffen, just because of his injuries, has not been able to be in that position. Next man up. There's an opportunity here for Matt Freese. He certainly didn't hurt himself tonight,
No.
and I think only helped himself. And so when you go around this roster of the starting lineup, I don't think. Well, Malik Tillman's interesting because he was basically non-existent the first half and really kind of uninspired in the first half. And yet the second half, I thought he was really, really good and one of the players of the game. We'll get to Chris Richards because he deserves a section by himself here in a second. I don't think that Jack McGlynn helped his case. I don't think that Luca De La Torre helped his case. I think that Patrick Agyemang is, we've talked about him in that there is an immaturity to him that's kind of to be expected, not because he's necessarily that young, but he's inexperienced. But I want to see more, and I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, especially because it's an evergreen problem for this U.S. team up top. I don't think he hurt himself, but there still has to be more. I think Sebastian Berhalter helped himself. He does things that people don't notice, and I'm not just talking about the assist on the goal. He's clean. He's predictable in the best possible sense. Diego Luna. Even though he, didn't score a goal and ultimately got subbed out, I still loved his work and his personality on the field. I think it's infectious out there. I was so frustrated with Max Arston, not because he's not a good player, but because of the way that the Saudi Arabians played. He had so much time and space out there left. And what I was frustrated also with in terms of the team was the amount of back passes and the amount of looking back first as opposed to risking. I don't even care if you lose it. The ability and the willingness to take players on and to kind of force some things, you have to do that. I understand the virtue of patience in this game. Believe me, I do. But at some point, you got to make something happen. And then too often in the first half, nobody wanted to make anything happen.
I wonder about the Luna-Tillman dynamic sometimes. I know they alternate, but Luna's main reference point on the field is on the left side, and then Tillman plays centrally. And I wonder if you're getting the best out of Diego Luna by putting him on the left wing rather than allowing him to float more centrally.
I think it probably depends on the game. So in the Trinidad game, it was fine because he was free to literally go anywhere because Trinidad were so bad, there was so much space. In this game, it was a lot tighter, a lot more difficult. Potentially, yeah, It was always going to be a difficult game. I played in a ton of games like that where the team is sitting deep. You don't touch the ball a lot. You're not impactful in the game a lot. And so it's hard to find the ball and find space. And people go, well, just go get the ball and make something happen. It's not that easy, right? So this was a more challenging game. But by the way, guys, that is what a real game looks like, right? The Trinidad game it was like playing against boys, right? And this is what a real game looks like. So do they deserve another opportunity to go again? I think so, Mosse. But they've got to be better if they really want to make a case to be starting.
I don't know if you remember this, but when the roster was first announced, I saw this abundance of center forwards: Agyemang, Brian White, Downs, even Haji Wright can play as a center forward, and a scarcity of wingers. And so I thought the U.S. might play a lot with two up top in this Gold Cup, and we saw some of that in the second half when he brought on Downs. Do you think that's an interesting look that you might want to see more of throughout this tournament?
Well, in circumstances, yeah, those two are hard to play against. I mean, Agyemang and Downs or Agyemang and Haji Wright on the field together, that's not fun to play against, right? And so I think depending on the circumstance, but right now it's pretty clear Mauricio Pochettino wants to play in a certain way, and that doesn't look like it's changing anytime soon.
All right, so the first half comes and goes. I mean, I think on the 45th minute, that was the first shot that the U.S. had. So while they had all this possession, they weren't creating a whole lot. Saudi Arabia had a couple of opportunities, one of them that was snuffed out by Chris Richards. And I guess let's talk about Chris Richards here because it is time for our boost of the game presented by Yerba Madre. Yerba Madre, the boost you need when you want to win. Drink Yerba Madre, come to life. All right, Chris Richards, for me, the player of the game. Even without scoring the goal, I thought that he was vital. We mentioned I think goal saving, because if you actually look at the block that he had, the amount of space that he covered to make that block, and this shot, if you're watching the pod, you can see that it's going on the far side. But for me, when it comes to Chris Richards, he should get all of the flowers. And I will raise my hand. I will be the first to admit that when Chris Richards first burst on the scene, didn't move me. I said, no, I'm not seeing it. There was a immaturity to his play, and there was a real kind of lackadaisical type of approach that scared me for a center back. but he has grown with leaps and bounds. Obviously, things have gone well from a club perspective. He has matured. But as I mentioned on the air, while he has matured and gotten more serious in, I guess, for lack of a better word, his craft, he hasn't lost that smile. And you saw it after the game and that joy. And I don't think that's just the exuberance of youth. I genuinely think that's who he is. And I hope he never loses that. As serious as he may take his job, which is important, don't lose that. And I want that for this team. But he has grown into a man, but also a player that I think has solidified one of those center back positions.
Don't you think, Lex, with center backs in particular, it takes time to mature? Like,
Yep.
You don't get a lot of 18, 20, 22-year-old center backs who are really ready for prime time, right? So it's taken him time. And I agree with you. He was raw. He had potential. There's a lot of guys in U.S. soccer like that who are center backs who you go, but he is, I mean, we've watched him grow into a man this year.
Yep.
With Crystal Palace winning the FA Cup. He has become like a real player who's dependable now.
And with all the missing players and Tyler Adams being slowed by injury, he's the most established player on the field. And you wondered if he was going to take on that leadership role and be this imposing figure. And I think we're seeing it through 2 games. Certainly tonight, he was like a man amongst boys, clearly the best player on the field.
Yeah, when I did my top 5 players and that have the most to gain, I didn't even include Chris Richards because for me, like I said, he has solidified that position. Tonight, Tim Ream next to him. I actually did include Tim Ream in my top 5 because, as I said before, 2 years ago, if you had asked anybody, including Tim Ream, by the way, that Tim Ream was going to be the potential starter for 2026, everybody would have said no. A wonderful player, great servant, but somebody else will come along. I guess the problem is that nobody else has come along. But from a Tim Ream perspective, he's just sitting there raising his hand and say, I'm still here. I'm still the best that you got. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but for Tim Ream, in terms of the most to gain, he could parlay this into yet another starting job in yet another World Cup.
You know what happens, Lex? Every time Pochettino looks around, watches training, goes to think about his team with his staff, he's like, well, I guess we'll play Tim Ream again, right? Like, and that's it's crazy, but he's just still there. And you would say right now, there's nobody in the pipeline that you're gonna go, oh yeah, he'll definitely take that spot from Tim Ream. I don't think so. Cameron Carter-Vickers, we'll see. Austin Trusty, probably not ready. Walker Zimmerman, no. Miazga, no. Miles Robinson. But he's still, you can tell he's not his first choice because Tim Ream's playing. But back to Chris Richards, it's been a great two games and excellent tonight. But I just want to remind people, coming up on Sunday, Pirot and Dukans Nazon from Haiti, real players.
Yep.
Okay, these are real players. Quarterfinals, Costa Rica, Ugalde is the kid's name.
Yep. Alonso Martinez,
sorry. Or Mexico, both Jimenez's, right? Those are real players. Canada, you've got Promise David, Jonathan David, Kyle Larin, Taj Buchanan. Those are real players. So we're going to see now what Chris Richards is made of in these next 3-4 games.
And Lex, I know tomorrow on TV, you're going to have a U.S. center back power ranking. So we're going to delve into this issue on television. Landon, let me ask you this. I know you've talked a lot already this summer about the missing players. And so I don't know if that's a topic you want to delve back into, but we know the last time the U.S. was coached by a foreign manager at a World Cup was Jurgen Klinsmann, 2014. You famously took a sabbatical during that cycle and then were controversially left out of the squad. I'm very fascinated by what the first U.S. squad post-Gold Cup is going to look like when all these missing players want back in and certain guys will have shined during this tournament. How do you think Pochettino is going to manage that moving forward? I don't think Pulisic's going to be left out, but the relationship between him and Pochettino moving forward, that's going to be interesting to watch as well.
So Pochettino said, I think yesterday in his press conference, and again, I don't know if this is getting lost in translation, but he said, most or many of the players here have a chance to make the World Cup roster. And I was like, whoa, that's a big statement. So we're going to learn a ton about Mauricio Pochettino through this Gold Cup, yes, but in the September friendlies, because does he bring Christian Wright back in? Does he bring Yunus Musa in? Do the Club World Cup guys, we assume that they're gone because of Club World Cup, but maybe he wouldn't have brought them in. The Joe Scallies, Tanner Tessmans, Josh Sargents, are those guys coming in? Which guys from this camp made a big enough impression to go in, right? And you have to imagine everything that's gone on this summer and with all the missing pieces, that first camp, he is going to go no mercy, I'm bringing everybody I want into this camp. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to learn everything about him.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops twice a week right here on my very own YouTube page. The only way to stay up to date is to hit that subscribe button down below. Size the day, and see you soon.